Good day, everyone. Welcome to one of our bite-sized videos, of which the purpose is to bring you, the integrator, up to speed with some of the basic concepts surrounding the Flowgear integration experience, as well as take a brief dive into one of our popular use cases. We're going to start by exploring the screen in front of you, the Flowgear console, which is the very first thing you'll be greeted with after logging into Flowgear. The Flowgear console provides access to all the components relevant to your integrations. From here, you can navigate to spaces that facilitate the setup for different parts of the integration. The three primary spaces that I'd like to briefly touch on are the workflows, connections, and drop points. Workflows can be found by navigating to the workflow section over here. And workflows provide a canvas from which you can drag and drop connectors and tooling provided by the Flowgear platform and construct your integration according to your business rules. We will go more in depth around workflows once we start to explore the specific use case. Connections, which we can navigate to by clicking over here, are spaces with which you can provide credentials that allow you to authenticate and connect to the systems which you would like to integrate with. We can go ahead and click on the new button over here, and we can go ahead and select a particular connector to work with, and choosing any one of the connectors we can see here within the connector section, such as Connect, Rise, Manage. You'll see there's a space in which you can plug in credentials that are relevant to that specific platform. You then have the option of providing credentials for different profiles, such as test and production, and you will be able to run your workflow or integration within that profile, which will then target that specific environment that you've set up. If you set up your credentials correctly, you can click on the play button over here, which, if successful, will give you a green banner telling you that the test succeeded. Finally, we have the drop point section. The idea behind the drop points is that it is our solution to hybrid on-prem and cloud integrations. You can install the drop point agent onto your on-prem servers, which will allow us then to talk to those servers within the scope of what you allow us to do using the whitelisting features. This means that we can talk to your file systems, we can talk to your AD, or we can move data between CRMs and ERPs that are not exposed to the internet with the drop point. These three spaces are the most important aspects related to the integrations themselves within Flowgear. For a deeper dive into the elements that make up the Flowgear console, please see our bite-sized video focusing on navigating the Flowgear console. Next, we're going to take a deeper dive into workflows and nodes. To do this, we're going to navigate to the workflow section, which we have done by clicking on this workflow over here. And from there, we're going to open up a new workflow by clicking on the new button right over here, at which point we're given the option to name the workflow, which we can name it appropriately, and click on the OK button over here. At which point you're then greeted with the Flowgear design canvas, the purpose of which is to provide you with the space to drag and drop Flowgear tooling in a specific sequence in order to string it together and then form the basis of an integration from end to end. Now, to start dropping the tooling onto the canvas, we're going to click this plus icon over here, which is going to open up a list of our nodes. All of these little blocks are what we consider nodes, and simply put, a node is a function or set of functions that have been encapsulated in a certain way that the most complex aspects of it have been obscured from you, and only the parts that you have to interact with are exposed. Now, within our nodes, we have distinct categories, and the first category you can see here are the connectors. The connectors are responsible for talking to the systems with which you would like to integrate, and so all of the complexity around authenticating and talking to these platforms is hidden behind the node, and again, only the most relevant aspects of the node are exposed to you. Triggers are nodes that allow you to determine how a workflow should kick off. So it gives you architectural freedom around when a workflow should run and how it should run. In other words, if you would like a workflow to run twice daily or every 15 minutes, or perhaps on receiving a particular email, triggers will facilitate that process. Processes are the nodes that are responsible for actually supplementing, transforming, and enriching the data sets that you need to work with. So when you receive data from system A and needs to be transformed to a different structure so that system B can ingest it, the processes are there to facilitate that functionality, as well as implement further business rules that you may have necessary for your integration. And then finally, evaluators are the nodes that are going to have a look at the result of a transaction and allow you to kick off additional supporting logic within that workflow. In other words, should a transaction fail, does somebody need to be emailed? Does someone have to be informed in some way? Does a report have to be built? So on and so forth. These four categories encapsulate all the tools that Flowgear provides the integrator, allowing you to build both simple and complex integrations within the scope of a simplified experience.
For this demo, we're going to be exploring the mechanics behind our REST request connector. We're going to use the REST request connector to consume an open API definition, formerly known as Swagger, to expose the capabilities of the API whose definition we are consuming. By the end of the demo, you should be comfortable with using our REST request connector, including the setup for the connection, the generation of the samples, and the behavior of the connector on the canvas. To kick off the demo, the first thing we're going to want to do is open up a brand new workflow. After having navigated to the workflow section over here, the next step is to click on the new button on top here. Now that we're on the design canvas, we want to start interacting with that particular REST request connector. To do so, we're going to want to add the REST request connector onto the canvas. And the first step in doing that is opening up a list of all of our connectors by clicking the plus icon over there. From here, you can navigate to the connector section and you can search the REST request connector and click on that over there. And what that will do for you is apply that particular connector to the canvas. Now that we've done that, the next step to working with a REST request connector is to ingest the open API or Swagger definition from the API which you would like to interact with. To do this, we have to set up a connection for the connector. To do that, we will go to the connection drop down over here, and we can click on the plus icon, which is going to add a brand new connection for us to work with. Then we can click on the pencil just next to it, which is going to open that connection. What that does for us is gives us a space to plug in all the credentials we may need for this particular interaction with whatever API you want to talk to. What you'll also notice is that there are two profiles that we can work with, test and production. And for the purpose of this demo, we're going to populate the test profile. So now the first stage to consuming the OpenAPI definition is to go and get it from where the source is and plug it into the connection, and then go ahead and refresh the metadata. Now we've got a little sample over here from a company called Swagger UI. They are a big part of what makes the standard what it is. And so within the scope of their definition they've provided here, you'll find a little URL here, which is what they call the base URL. And most companies that are exposing their APIs in this manner will also have exactly the same thing available to you. And if you click on that and open up a new tab, you'll notice that it's a raw JSON document, which is describing the API and how we can interact with it. So we're going to head back there. We're going to grab that URL, copy it, and we're going to plug it into the Open API section over here. After that's been done, we're going to go and refresh the metadata for that particular definition. Now, if you're working with an API that has a particular authentication type, such as basic or bearer, you can go ahead and set that up here. Or if they expect you to target a specific URL that's not in the definition already, you can add all of those things here. For the purpose of this demo, that's actually all we have to do. So we can go ahead and save this, and we can head back to the canvas. Now that we've done that, the first thing we want to do is switch over back to the test profile, where we have set the credentials for. And now that we've provided a definition, we can head to the options section over here and say choose sample. Now, based on the definition that we just consumed, we have a list of potential actions that we can perform against that API right in front of us over here. And so what we're going to do in this case is choose the add pet sample. So what this has done for us now in summary is we've been able to consume a definition that's been exposed by a third party or a company exposing the API. We consume that definition, and we can then expose what potential actions we can perform against that API. And having clicked on one of those actions, we have the ability to expose some of the most important aspects of it, such as the request sample. So this particular definition is telling us this is what they expect us to pass through to be able to create a pet in this case within the environment. Now that we have an idea of what's expected to be passed along to the API for this pet store, we can go ahead and actually build out a mock process of what that might look like. And so we're going to go ahead and get a sample document that we may want to transform into what's expected. So in this case, we're simply going to go and add a note over here in which I will copy a sample document that I have right over there. Now, within the traditional scope of an integration, this particular information would be coming from somewhere, whether it's from another API calling into Flowgear, a source system that you're pulling it from, SQL, some kind of CRM or ERP. In this case, we're going to use a sample structure document that we can work with. But we're still going to mimic the point of the integration that involves mapping the structure from point to point. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and open up our nodes again here, head to the processor section, and choose the quick map tool, which is our flagship transformation tool. We can then take that sample data over here, pass it along into the source, and close that up. And then the final step is to take that result and plug it into the request. So now that we've done this, the quick map has visibility of a sample document that we've provided, as well as the document that the pet store is expecting us to pass along to go and create a new pet. And once that's all been set up, we actually have the ability to go and view that mapping. And what that'll do for us is give us a visual representation of that structure on the left and on the right. On the left-hand side, we have the information coming from our test sample data. And on the right-hand side, we have the structure that's expected to be passed along to the pet store API. What this tool will now allow us to do is visually map the structures from A to B by simply dragging across the points of data from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And we can begin by adding some of these basic values over here. As you can see on the right-hand side, we have a preview of that data slowly forming up and telling us exactly what that structure is going to look like. Now, beyond the simple mapping from point to point and changing the structure from A to B, the quick map also provides you with a space to further enrich and supplement your data. To do this, we've implemented a number of functions which are very closely mimicked or mocked over the Excel environment so that we can provide you with tooling that is quite familiar with practically anybody who has worked around computers. And so within that scope, if you wanted to do a sum or a count or even a lookup function, then you can do all of this within the quick map and further enrich and supplement your data. The idea being, if you have further rules or restrictions that you have to impose on the data on the other end, you can do that all within the scope of one tool. And so there's not a lot that I really need to do here, but what I will do is I will trim the name to a maximum of 25 characters, just as an example of something we can do to make this a little more intelligent. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and close this up because we're happy with that particular mapping. Now we can go ahead and hook up all of the points. These lines are the logical flows of which connectors will go in what direction. Now that we have our mapping accurate, the next step is to go and run this. But before we run this, we need to understand what kind of authorization or authentication this particular API is expecting. Now, in the case of the Swagger UI, they're simply expecting us to pass an API key header through with the actual API key that we authorize here. If it was basic authorization or if it was bearer tokens, you could do that within the scope of the connection. In this case, we provide a space to provide custom headers in case an API provides headers that are not the norm, in this case, which is not. We're going to go ahead and create a test API key over here, copy this and authorize it. And then we're going to go back to our canvas, open up the header section and create a custom header called API key and provide that API key within the scope of that header. And now we can close this off. So now that we have the sample ready and we've got the right API key to authorize, we can go ahead and we can test this. When we click on that test button, it's going to run the solution from point to point for every node that has been hooked up to the canvas. At the bottom, we are greeted with a workflow activity log, which is showing us the result of every node, its transaction, and what it looks like. In this case, we simply have the QuickMap node with its source data, which I've used a sample for, spitting out a particular result that looks like this. And then finally, the next step is passing that data along to that REST request node to be passed along to the API, where they then go and respond with a particular payload where the ID is now being provided back to us, which means we have successfully created this particular entry or record. We can also tell that it was successful based on the response code they provided, which was 200. And so now we have a successful creation of a pet within that environment. Now, additionally, if we wanted to extract some of the other capabilities out of the connector, we can go ahead and put another REST request node on the canvas, pick the connection we set up previously, and head back to the samples we saw to pick something else. And this time, we're going to get pet by ID. Now, what that's going to do is exhibit a different kind of behavior where this particular endpoint expects us to pass a query string parameter or a custom parameter into the call in the form of a pet ID. And the node knows to expose that field to you as a custom property that you can then go and plug information into. So if we simply go and add a 1, for instance, in here, click on the dropdown and say run this node in isolation, and that process will then go ahead and look for that pet with ID 1 and return a response to us with the particular pet that is of that ID. And before we even ran that, we would have had a response sample here to work with based on what was being pulled from the Swagger definition. This gives you the basic idea of how to work with the REST request connector. The idea is that it can ingest a particular open API definition or Swagger example and spit out useful samples and custom properties for you to work with on the scope of the Flowgear canvas. Now that we've shown you how to build a workflow, if at any point you have to go back and see what happened in that workflow, you can navigate to the workflow logs over here. For more detailed information on the topics we explored today, or if you would like to explore more complex aspects of the platform, including architecture and best practices, please join us for our technical certification course hosted on udemy.com. Also, go ahead and check out some of our other bite-sized videos for more common use cases and platform features. Also, please go ahead and visit our website where you can register for a free trial and complimentary proof of concept, have a look at our unique pricing model, or explore our list of over 200 pre-built connectors. Thank you very much for joining me for this short demo. Have a lovely day further.